I already moved all of the UI into the counter, and then I'm just accepting these. Okay. In app, so I have this where they're both using the same state, right? So I'm going to call this counter one, and then I'm going to create a second one and do counter two and counter two. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass, I'm going to take these also out of here, and I'm going to put them in here, and I'm going to take these out of here, and I'm going to set counter. Okay, so now I have my set counter, and my counter is all that's being passed into counter, and I have my increment and decrement. It should work all the same way. You go back to app.js, and then each counter will get a set or a counter, which equals whichever one it is, and a set counter, which will equal whichever one it is. Okay, so now they have their own state. That makes sense?
Could you go back to the counter JS? Yeah, that makes sense. The counter.
So it's identical to what we had, right? And then it just has, it's just getting the counter and set counter from props instead of from state.
Right.
And then we create the state elsewhere and pass it in.
Alright. That was super simple, but also why would I never guess?
And this is a kind of a contrived example because you would normally just keep the state within the counter as opposed to passing it in like we are. Right? Because if I just get rid of these and I create, oops, const counter set counter equals use state 0, and then I get rid of these, then I can just call counter this way, and it works just like we expect it to, and I can add as many as I want. And now I have all these counters that are
So
all
keeping you state inside of the component will.
If it's component state, then it makes sense for it to be there. But I wanted you to get a feel for passing not only like a variable in, but a function in that you would use within the counter or within the child app, because that's what you're doing in the to-do app, right? You have to pass functions down. Okay.
Did you change your index.js at all?
No. Well, not since we first started, when we just removed the report web vitals. But after that, no.
So you go to your app.js thing. Oh. How come you have two export defaults?
I do?
Don't you have an encounter too?
Yeah, so you can have one for each app or each component.
Oh.
This is the default export for app. This is the default export for counter. So when I import counter or import from this file, this is the default way, right? If I do a named export, then I'd have to wrap it. And this can be whatever I want it to be.
What key did you do to unwrap?
Command Z.
I didn't know if
No, just that. So yeah, so each file can have a default export and then as many named exports as you want. So you think of each file as a module, its own module, and then it's not one for the entire project, it's one for each file.
The first line changed? Okay. That makes
Which one?
sense. For the counter, yeah.
Yeah, so I just took the counter and the set counter out of the props and I set them as use state like we were doing in the app.js.
Yeah.
And I got rid of the state out of the app.js just to show that typically this is how I would contain it as opposed to having to create tons of different pieces of state within app.js and pass it down. You just let counter, because app.js doesn't really care what the state is, right? Or shouldn't. Now, maybe there is some reason that app.js should care. Then you'd have to have either a way for the counter to pass up its state to app.js or do you have a return statement in both files? Go to your counter. Go to well. So your export default counter, but in app.js you're importing it as a named import. So you don't put the curlies around it if it's a default export.
I tried that and that's when it disappeared. And now it's
Now it's crashing. Go back to counter.js. Scroll up. Okay. So go to the 3 lines next to update. Go to more tools. task manager. And then wait for just a second for it to figure stuff out. And then go to this React tab that says 93%. And end process. Okay, you can close the task manager and refresh your app. Try, yeah.
You can do it. See what happened when I deleted
So in your console, there's not any.
no errors.
So let's go to. Go to the elements. There's the okay, so let's go there. Oh, you don't have any. Is this running? Did you change your index? Yes.
No.
So go back here and let's put your cursor in there and then hold shift and hit enter. Just close it out. Okay, so something is. It's not letting it render. Okay.
It was when I first deleted those brackets is when it first crashed.
Which practice?
Around the counter,
It's the only one that
right here. That was when it first crashed and everything. I had a bunch of errors before.
So let's try. Okay, so there's something in your counter that's looping or something. Display plus one. Let's see anything it should be doing though. Oh, you have a new counter in here. So you're re-rendering itself within itself.
Oh, cause that was from wasn't it app. That makes sense. Whee!
So then what was happening was it never finished rendering because it just rendered that and then it wanted to render itself and it was constantly going back and rendering itself.
What did I do?
Middle one.
What did I do?
Turn on the middle one.
Where was it?
Turn on the middle one.
I was more. What did I do? What did I do?
Okay, so I want to do one more thing. Then this one's going to be more complex. I know. You're going to love it though. It's going to be great. It's
Is it
going to be.
within this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I need help then before that.
Okay.
I don't know what
Same.
Then I'll come help you.
before
It's all complex to me. There's nothing that's not complex to me.
Okay, at this point we have
It's all
deleted both
complex.
of those
Oh,
lines.
okay. These guys are done.
Yep.
When you say
And
no
also
function,
line
that's
two.
complex.
And then we imported the counter.
To app.
Yep.
It's just this contract and these guys, right? No?
Depends on how you.
Oh, I gotta do
What you can do is just delete that line. then go here next to counter and hold, is it control and hit space and hit enter. And then here, we took those two out and used state in here.
Oh, so the ones that we had in.
Yeah, we deleted them.
Right here, okay.
So, yeah, just. You just need one. It should be counter and second counter. So, it should be like that line that's highlighted up there.
Oh, and then you stick that.
So, yeah, equals, and then the initial state should be 0. Okay, let's go down. Oh, just get rid of the second counter. That must be it, right? Go up and see. Oh no, you can get rid of it. Get rid of that. And get rid of one up there, and then add a opening frame. And then get rid of the closing. Save it. No, you're Okay, so now go back to your app, yes, and just duplicate, do more of those. So you need to wrap it in a div or, yeah, or just the regular. You don't need div now. You can just do it regular. So then you can add as many as you want. Yeah.
And that was it?
That's it. You said yours was just broken too? Okay. Fully fixed? Travis?
So what do you say about the app.js? What do we have to eliminate from the app.js? Is that, was I?
So yeah, you can get rid of both of those states.
Yeah.
And in counter JS.
Yeah.
Yeah, you good?
Yeah, but I don't have, let me just make sure, cause I forgot how to run now.
It's this one right here. It says React App.
But that's my old one.
Just refresh it.
That's my old one.
Oh, go back to your code.
Oh yeah, run it import?
You just gotta open your console and then start.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, that's right, I didn't start. Okay. Cool.
So we do or we don't need to put counter into index.js?
No.
Why not?
Index.js just has the app, and the app is
App
the
has it
counter.
in there.
Yep.
Nice.
How is your
Oh, wow.
reset button below the count?
Just the CSS I did. I made it with 100% and I made
How
my
come-
flex wrap.
How does
You
it
didn't
look like
set
that,
it
bro?
What?
I'm just trying to figure.
I don't think they have the cool numbers like you, man.
I added this full width class. And then I made that class
Oh, okay.
with 100%.
Oh, I see.
And then I made my counter have flex wrap. So then it wraps underneath and it's the full width. Alright, so everybody has a counter or multiple counters that can work, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to create our own hook. I know, it's gonna be great. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be a really easy hook, okay? So we're going to create that hook within the app.js. Okay, so we're going to create a function. We're going to call it useCounter. Actually, let's see. Should we create this in? Let's create this, yeah, in counter.js. So delete what I just did in app.js and go to counter.js. Okay, and we're gonna at the bottom here say function useCounter. Okay, and we're gonna take an initial state. Okay. So now what we're gonna do here is we're gonna just go up and copy all of this. We're gonna cut it. We're gonna put it in here. So it's in this useCounter.
You said cut it.
Yeah, Command X. So highlight it all and Command X, or you can just copy it and then delete it after. Cut just does it in both in one. Okay. So now we should have in the useCounter function, there should be a counter for state, and then our increment, decrement, and reset if you have a reset button, which wasn't required. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to return, and I'm going to return an object. We can return whatever we want here. I'm going to return an object because I like not having to worry about the order. So most of the time it'll either return a value, just a straight value 1, or an object of values, or an array of values. Okay? I like object if there's going to be more than one. So we're going to send back counter, increment, decrement, and reset. Okay? Okay, once you have that, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to create we're going to use our useCounter, okay? So we're going to say const, and this is going to be an object because we know we get an object back, equals useCounter, okay? Which is a function, so we call it. It wants us to give it our initial state, so we're going to give it our initial state. Okay, and then in here, we're getting all of these back, right? So we're just going to say counter, increment, decrement, and reset. Okay. Okay, so the only other thing we need to do is we're accepting initial state here, but we're not using it. We just need to put it right here. Okay, so that way if you pass 12 up here, all of them should start at 12.
You have use state inquiry above the counter function?
Yes. Yeah, because we're using it down in our useCounter.
Can you do your app.js?
We didn't do anything to it.
Well, I didn't do the code the way you had it, so.
Oh, I just added a bunch of counters.
1,000 counters.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have this hook that does all of this for us. Okay. Which doesn't do us a lot because we just basically moved everything right into that function. So now what we're going to do is if you highlight all of that, and then if you right click on it, there should be Do you see this refactor?
Mhm.
Yeah. So make sure the whole thing's highlighted, and then click on that refactor. Wait, yours has an error though.
Yeah, I need to erase this.
No, you need that. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? It's because your return's above that one, so you need to get rid of that one. Okay, now it's good. So now highlight. Okay, once you hit refactor, it's gonna give you some options. And we're gonna choose move to a new file. So refactor, then move to a new file. Okay, and then it's gone.
It's gone. It's just gone.
Notice it went to a new file in here called use counter, and it also imported use counter and removed the use state import for you. Yeah? This is right. Go back to your counter.js. And then look at the top. Use counter is imported. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how you use the refactor. Okay. So, one more thing. We're now going to take this. Wait, I might wait for Kamala to come back because, yeah, she chose a terrible time to walk out.
Just to walk out of class. You know what? Another reason. This is the ocean.
Oh yes.
That's the sand. That's the grass. So that's how I can tell if it's right or wrong. It always starts with the ocean. So
Nice.
the sand into the grass, and it finishes with the sand. It's Hawaii, man. It's pretty much Hawaii right there.
It's true.
Yeah, that I made the blade come down too far, and now it's like right on me.
Yeah.
I did that.
It's right on
So
me.
sorry. We can raise it back up if you like.
I don't think it goes higher than that. We've tried before. It doesn't go higher than that.
Oh, if you say so. I know it does.
Telling you, it doesn't go higher than that.
Yes, it does. Set. Yep. See. There you go.
But the bottom one still hits us is the thing.
I don't feel it anymore now.
Oh, okay. Well, I do.
Oh yeah, you do. God, that's terrible.
That's why I was like, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, you're right, because it doesn't matter for you. Wow, that's messed up, man. You know you want to switch seats with me.
I'm okay.
He's like,
I have
Travis
to
can
be.
take over the class.
I have to be next to this.
Travis can take care of the class. You read it. Yeah, let me take over the class, man. Nothing get done.
So while we're waiting for her, we'll just move a couple things.
We'll move a couple.
So we're gonna move. So we're gonna move these up into the counter so that these are props for the counter. I know.
How do you do that?
I just highlighted it and did Command X.
Okay.
We sort of waited for you. So we're just moving these up into counter right here so that they're props instead of coming out of use counter. So we're gonna
I erased it, I think.
just Command Z. Now Command X. And then put your cursor inside of the parens. And Command V. Okay, and then get rid of this line
Command B?
V.
Oh, V. Oh.
Okay? So now it should look like this,
Mhm.
and it should be broken over here. So broke. Okay? So, everybody's broken at this point? They look like this? Get rid of that next line, line 4. Okay, now go to app.js. Okay, and above the return here, we are going to put const and we're gonna say counter 1, okay, equals use counter zero. And then up here we'll have to import use counter from use counter. What? Oh, you know what, it's probably, okay, it's got it, when we did that refactor, it made it a named export. So you gotta have the curlies on it. Okay? So now this is actually an object, right? Of counter, increment, decrement, and reset. So we could destructure it here, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this counter and we're just gonna, right here, we're gonna create, we're gonna destructure it in place on the counter, which goes this, counter 1. So that destructures that object as props into the counter. If I save it, then that first counter should start working. Right? Okay, so I'm gonna now create counter 2. Let's start that one at 12. Oh, 21. Okay, and I'm gonna destructure that one.
Is that from your computer, Tom?
What?
The music.
The music? Yeah, it's coming from up there. I never turned off the music.
Well, now the audio is blocked.
Yeah,
It's streaming.
oh, yeah, I don't think it could be heard because it's not on here. It's up
Yeah.
there,
Oh, okay.
so we could barely hear it.
So you just, how many counters do you want us to make? As many as you
It
want?
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So see
And
now.
so it'll automatically start at those numbers, yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
So and you can change. The other thing you could do is on your use counter. Right now we have reset is defaulting to 0. If you want it to reset back to your initial state, you could change the reset function to take initial state and use it for the reset instead of 0. It's up to you. Well, when I'm here, if I hit reset, it's going to 0 instead of to 12. Which is what I told it initial state was, so I think either way is intuitive ish. Everybody got it? Comma? It's working. Errors? What are your errors?
I think it's to do with an import. My use. So you imported use counter into counter, right?
Now we're in app.js.
Okay. So
Counter doesn't have it anymore. counter should look like this. It's essentially just returning DOM and it gets these as. So make sure that you don't have the use counter and that you're not using use counter above the return anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then app.js just looks like this. Okay, and so you'll notice it didn't really matter where the state was as long as we were passing it down, right? We kept taking it in and out of counter and having it in app and then in counter and then back in app. Now it's living in its own hook. So we made it our own hook called use counter, which essentially just uses some state and then passes stuff back. Right, so let's, is everybody here? Everybody gets what's happening in app.js, yeah? Everybody gets what's happening. You all understand this piece right here, okay? Counter is straightforward, yes, at this point. Okay, let's open up use counter. Okay, does this one make sense? How you would do this, and then also when you would use it?
As long as you're recording the function to the component that you're trying to run that function through.
Yeah, so essentially it's, we're wrapping use state in its own function, right? And then we're also creating these other functions that will do stuff with that state. And then we're passing back the state and then the functions that we want the user to use, right? So we've kind of created our own API here for counter that will set all the state however we want it to, and all you have to do is say, when somebody clicks increment, here's the increment function, here's the decrement function, right? And you could take this and use it anywhere. Like I said, you might want to take this initial state and set it on the reset. Yeah, so now if I go here and hit reset, it should go back to 12, which was my initial state.
So I want to do.
Okay, so so sometimes you'll create your own hooks to do repeatable things that you're constantly using state to do, right? Or to get pieces of state that you want to keep. So when we get to state management stuff, then we'll see some other hooks that we use or create to do that as well. But this gives you a taste of hooks. So the other thing we could do is we could add a little input in here, right? Type equals text. And then we could say value equals name, or counter name, and on change equals set counter name. Okay, and then we'll accept those up here from the from the props. Okay, won't worry too much about the CSS here, but maybe what we'll do instead of this is we'll create, we'll do this in a minute, but so we have this input now, and we could go to use counter, and we could have another piece of state that is counter name, and set counter name equals use state. Right, call it counter to start. Maybe initial name. could even default initial name to be counter and default initial state to be 0. Counter name, and then let's say const update counter name equals event, and then we'll say set counter name event dot target dot value, and then send out update counter name. Something must like run by.
Not in their walker, other dog, or walker.
Oh, other
Yeah.
dog, yeah, that's the other dog reaction right there. It's not a human. Damn dog, get out. Come on, please.
So now notice, we didn't do anything in our counters or in our app.js to pass this down, but because we named this counter name, your input should have whatever the initial name that you gave here in all of them, right? So this probably didn't work because I didn't use set counter name, I used update counter name. So I have to go in and change counter to accept update counter name instead of set. And that was just so that we could have this automatically pull the value out.
You can't do that if you have set.
Well, you couldn't have two functions called set counter name.
Oh,
So we could call this one update counter name and then call this one set counter name. Or set name and then this could be set counter name. So to get it to work, we just need to go back here and accept it as update counter name. So now if you type in here, it should change. Notice it doesn't change all of them, it just changes this one. So we just changed it to be update counter name in counter.js. Huh?
This is counter to this.
Counter.js, yep.
I missed a lot up at the top there. And you got the-
No, they're all right here. I just added two
Oh.
function or two. I just added counter name and update counter name.
Okay.
And yeah, we did take out that first line. We're not importing counter there.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, everybody has this?
Most of
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the next thing I would say is let's create another component and let's call it counter name. Okay. And we're gonna have it get counter name or name and set name. Okay. And then in here we're gonna use state. False. Okay. So in this one is going to conditionally return based on this piece of state. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna make it so that that name is a header as opposed to an input, unless you click on it, and then it'll change the input and let you change it, and then when you click off of it, it will change back to a header. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll say return edit with a question mark, else, and then it'll be that div. So here it will be an input type equals text. Okay, and then it'll be value equals name, and onChange equals set name. And then this, instead of a div, we'll do an h2. And inside of that, we'll have name. Okay, and then this will say onClick equals set edit true, and then onBlur equals set edit, oops, set edit false. Does that make sense what we're doing? Kind of. Is that squeaking?
Yeah,
Your-
look at
I think there might be like a bird outside or something.
Or in here?
up in there, you know?
In the ceiling.
So what is this doing? I was,
Nothing yet.
okay.
For a second I thought it was the table.
Me too.
And every time you were typing it was happening.
When I move towards the window, it stops. See?
Maybe it wants to code.
Maybe, yeah, I was talking to someone.
Hey,
So,
nope, hit enter. Hit.
yes, he's probably more on it than I am. So he's right over there somewhere, and every time I would come close, it gets quiet.
So let's talk about what it's going to do. It'll accept a name and a function to set the name, okay? And then we use our own state to determine whether or not we're currently editing it, okay? If we are editing it, then it has an input, is what it will render, okay? And the input has the value as the name that's being passed in. On change, it'll use that set name function, okay? And then the type is text, and then onBlur is the function that we'll call when you leave the text in the input, right? So when your cursor is in it, then it's focused. When your cursor leaves it, it will blur. Okay? So onBlur is going to change our edit state to false. if, so this renders if edit is true, this renders if edit is false, which is just an H2 that renders the name, and if we click on the H2, then set edit will be true. Okay, which will flip these. Okay, so everybody have this?
I just added something different.
I don't understand the true false part.
Okay, so we have edit that's set to false, okay? And this is an inline ternary, right? We've written these before,
Yeah.
okay? So if edit is true, then this renders. If edit is false, then this renders, okay? So we started as false, so this is what we'll render. If you click on this, then the onClick sets edit to true, which will stop rendering this and render this instead. Okay? And then what we'll want to do is we'll want to also make this autofocus, which is autofocus, and that's it. Okay? If you don't pass any value to an attribute like this, then it automatically gets true. Okay? So if you're gonna just pass equals true, then you can just do this. And this is preferred. Okay, so the autofocus will take, will automatically put your cursor in here. Okay? Then anything we type in there will update whatever these are. So name and set name, right? And then once you click out of it, it will set edit to false, stop rendering the input, and instead render the H2. Does that make sense? Everybody see where this is gonna go? Yeah? So we're gonna go back to our counter, and we're gonna delete, well, we're gonna replace the input that we made with counter name. If you start typing it, it should pull it up right here. You can hit this, it'll auto import it. Name equals counter name, and on chain set name equals update counter name. And then you can get rid of this input. Okay, so now you should have this guy. If you click it,
So you get rid of the input type.
yeah, I got rid of the extra one. So it should just be counter name and no input above it.
So this helps with the to-do
Maybe.
edit those two. That's nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Speaking of to do. Yeah. I was so hoping that go over that today. That delete button. It didn't happen. I was all ready to. I was all, yeah.
Well, we got this now.
So that's a help. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, whatever.
Takes care of the third of it.
Alright, I guess I'll ask questions then about the delete button.
Priorities.
What?
Priorities.
Yeah.
Got 5 minutes left and you're like, let me get this CSS.
there a reason that it doesn't, like, where I edited it, it doesn't go back
What do you mean?
when I click out, it doesn't render towards the CSS.
Doesn't render.
Like it, oh, so I have it,
Yeah.
I have this counter,
That's
and I go to click it, and then it turns into that. When I click out, it doesn't change back.
Go to your counter name. Do you have this on blur set this way? Should be an anonymous function. Set edit false. Then yes, that is the reason.
Makes sense, yeah.
I'm missing something there. Oh.
Oops. What were you looking for?
Down there. Class name. Too big. My stomach. Somebody's stomach is just with him. I would allow it roll.
That's a deep growl.
Yeah.
All right.
Now it's style too.
Which one?
Input dot counter
Counter
name.
name?
Input dot counter name.
Oh, yeah. That was just so that this would only apply to the input.
Hmm.
This one applies to both, but then this one overrides the text align.
Doesn't accept it.
Oh,
Let's
do this too. Inherit. Yeah. Everybody got it?
I hope so.
So the other thing you can do really fast is, remember we're accepting this initial state? In the app.js we have where we're passing 0, you can name it here too.
Oh, that's what's broken. Now with my use. Content.js is broken somewhere.
Okay? So now we have blah, blah, and stuff.
I have an aberration in tongue problems.
Tummy rumbles? we could create other buttons that do other things, right? So,
+5 +11.
any questions on any of the stuff we did tonight? Should give you some decent ideas around your to-do app. Should,
Yeah, sure.
okay. Teaches you how to pass things, how to use them.
That's the way.
You're probably not gonna make your own hook or need to make your own hook,
I'm for that.
but now you know how. At least like a basic hook.
Serve. I feel like personal app no.
Essentially, a hook is gonna have any of the state or like use effect stuff that you're gonna reuse and then just return what pieces you need from it. So,
Okay. More spending, more reading.
we will create other hooks.
Update on this, right? So we're pushing back, right?
Yeah, we're gonna push it to next Thursday.
Next.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So,
That's good, part 2.
yeah, it's through the end of the React stuff, right? It's through the end of the React.
Yeah, but there's a part 2 to the to-do.
Yeah, the part 2 is just hit an API and bring down to-do items.
Which we have done before, right?
Yeah, you've hit an API before.
Through a fetch, yeah.
Yeah, so you just,
The lesson's right there,
yeah.
like on the right space, there's a.
Yeah, and I changed it so that it uses a to-do app API.
That's nice.
So,
Appreciate it.
yeah, you just go hit it and it'll bring down stuff. And then you'll have functions to be able to like update, but the to-do app API is a placeholder API, so it won't actually update anything. So don't be concerned that when you're changing something, it doesn't actually change.
Cool. Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So don't you think they should rename React to Overreact?
No.
No?
No.
It's not Overreact?